Hey, left, right, out. It's been a little bit. I've been sick. It's really wiped me out. So I've been out of it for a little while. But I guess let's get straight into it. Some of the things that are going on that are relevant today, or actually happened yesterday and finished up today, was Pelosi's flight to Taiwan, which I think on the conservative side, I think they're kind of beating her up over this. I don't really mind it. They're an ally, they're a strategic partner, especially when it comes to the semiconductor industry or just chips in general. Since we've kind of pushed all that industry out of the states, even though we're passing bills that kind of we're trying to get them back, but at the same time we have all these regulations and EPAs all over, these new factories. So I don't see it as a huge deal. I do see it as kind of a political ploy for the Democratic Party to kind of to act like they're strong on China, strong against China, while at the same time kind of playing into their hand and that kind of developing alliance over there with the BRIC type nations, China, Russia, and India in particular. And what all this really does, which I could see there being a positive element to it, but what it's really doing is driving that wedge, because we just, with the Ukraine-Russia conflict, that to me is already kind of wrapped up. You're just going to have these skirmishes, and now it's just a really, I guess a reoccurring revenue stream for some of the defense manufacturers to keep sending weapons in there. After that's kind of wrapped up, you've just given Russia whatever quarter of Ukrainian landmass. You've pushed them into the arms of China. You've pushed India into the arms of both China and Russia. In a sense, you've caused them to make that decision, which just makes a lot of sense for them just to go that way. So now what you're doing here is you're driving that wedge into China, which China has a little more bite to it than even the Russians do when it comes to countermeasures against us when it comes to economic policy. I would argue, I have two different arguments. Militarily, I'd say that even at an inferior, man, yeah, right when you do this, you get messages. Get no messages all day long, and then right when you go on here, that people start messaging you. But anyway, so there, I would argue militarily, there is an argument that this inferior force with certain strategic weaponry could actually at least render the U.S. Military inept to a certain extent, where we would be incapable of really significantly striking a devastating blow to the Chinese military without involving a nuclear type strike. And that involves some of their hypersonic technology, some of their, I guess you call it, they kind of cheated and what do you call it, repurposed or re-engineered, reverse engineered some of our own stealth technology. Some of their buildup in the naval presence, some of just their training with some of their military. Granted, I know I've heard a lot of analysis that the Chinese military really isn't a tested military, and to a certain extent they are right. What really have they done? They really haven't had a external conflict besides some clashes with, I believe, India. Very minor clashes. But I think that those clashes, there's India. It was there was a border conflict, but I think what's happening now, we're actually solidifying that as in more of an economic relationship between them. I don't think they'll have that conflict anymore as much so, because now there's an interest for them to come together. But anyway, I would say on the economic side of things, because we're going to get into that here, the Chinese are still, they have been net sellers of treasuries, but they still hold a significant amount of U.S. treasuries, and if they wanted to, because they've come out and said that they're going to retaliate over whatever that means, over this flight to Taiwan by Pelosi. Now, to me, one of the best ways to do it is just dump treasuries. Dump what you have. See what happens. It's interesting to see that. They could do that, and then they could also impose some kind of tariff. They could stop sending over essential minerals or elements, or rare earth minerals, if they wanted to, essential components, which it seems like our supply chain is still jacked up. So if they did that, they're just crippled. They're already crippled, I guess. You'd break the other leg that they've already broken. Or our own government's kind of hampered that. They've given them the crutch that they can knock out. But So there's a number of ways they can get back at us. They can help solidify getting off the dollar when it comes to trading in oil and other commodities, which that's already been happening. It's been on a fast track with the Russia-Ukraine deal. But okay, so let's go into that Treasury thing, because now we're going to go into what's going on in the markets. The Treasury, this is very significant, and I know we've watched the market the last week or so just rip roar up higher, and I've actually gone in with what little money I have and reaffirmed my short positions on some of this, because when I look at this, granted, there seems to be this euphoria. The Fed just raised again. They're at 2.5, 2.25, 2.5%. And don't act like this is not going to have ramifications. Like, this policies come out, a couple quarters afterwards. So like I said, that 1.25, that was like kind of that's where my call was, and maybe I was wrong. And I'm not afraid to admit, I make calls. I don't just say stuff like a lot of people. I'm trying to make a call so that there's some kind of, you have some kind of basis of where I stand. I still stand by that 1.5 that there are 1.25 that there are companies that are starting to falter over that, and they will over the next coming quarters. Maybe I was wrong in the market really having a significant sell-off over that, because now we're at 2.5. But here's where things get really interesting, and you realize that this is a lot of a manipulation, is when we really take a look at the whole spectrum of Treasury bills, notes, and whatever, from the 1 month all the way to the 30-year. Let's, in particular, let's look at the 5 and the 10, which have been inverted for God knows how long. I believe the 2 is inverted as well. That yield curve has been inverted for a long time now. But and it seems like people have just completely ignored that at this point. We're just rip roaring higher, and like nothing can happen. That the Fed's getting away with this. But the chickens will come home to roost. Believe me, they will. Might be the I don't know when it's going to happen. There's going to be a point where it is going to happen. And in fact, this rip roar is just more of I would say, a self-fulfilling degradation in the bull's case, because what it's doing is it's giving more fodder for the Fed to keep hiking. It's actually pushing. It's actually giving more of a justification to keep raising rates at a certain extent. So if they can get away with another 75 basis point rate hike, they probably will. And where does that put us? Even if they did a 50, we're at 3% in September. But here's the thing. You're looking at the 10-year. I'm looking at the 10-year. The 10-year is down at like 2.59 or something like that. I mean, it's back up. We're seeing remarkable moves. I know I say that a lot. Remarkable moves in the 10-year. But over a historical period, these are remarkable short-term moves. When you're talking about 30 basis point moves in like a day, you're talking about the how long the yield curve's been inverted. You're talking about like we were at 3.25 just like last month. Now we're down at, it was at 2.59. Now we're at 2.8, I believe, last time I checked. But when I look at that, this is where I really came to the grasp that there's going to be something. We're going to have that corrective snap, and it's going to be vicious, it looks like, in my opinion. Yeah, I don't know. People, what do I tell you? People just start calling. It's going to be vicious, and here's why. When I look at the Fed funds rate, so we're at 2.25, 2.5. That's overnight lending rate for banks, these large banks, and I just got something from my institution that I use for trading, that their banking account is yielding 2%. But then I look at, if I wanted to go buy a 10-year Treasury, I was at that, like I said, it was like 2.59. I was like, so for an extra 10 years of risk, I can get 0.5% or whatever. Or if you were one of these banks, you can get 0.09% yield more by taking 10 years of risk. It doesn't make any sense how flat these, how I would call it, what's called the instantaneous rate, or what's called the overnight lending rate, or whatever it is. Of course, it's not necessarily. I mean, there's a little more nuance to it. But when you look at a Fed funds rate of 2.5, let's say 2.25, 2.5, and a 10-year rate of 6 or 2.7 or whatever it is, that is astronomically flat considering the risk premium or time premium of money. I mean, I don't even understand it at this point. It's illogical. It's irrational at this point. Um, it doesn't make any sense. So at the same time, it doesn't make sense for the market to rip roar and them to ignore all these signs. Not to mention what's happening in the housing market, what's going on there. There's a number of cracks in that wall. Surprisingly, that dam's held up more than I thought. I was calling that bubble popping earlier this year, and to me that bubble is at it. There's holes in the balloon, and the air is seeping out. There's multiple holes all over that balloon, and the air is seeping out of that, and eventually it's going to blow up. But we also look at the auto market, which I keep forgetting to bring up, the auto lending market, and that's starting to blow. But here's the thing. So I always bring up this, and we'll just go roll into this. The Fed balance sheet. The Fed balance sheet actually contracted this last week. It went down to where it was the week before because it expanded again, and now it's back down. It's like 8.9 trillion or whatever. But what I was looking at, it's essentially flat. But then we look at consumer credit, which is at it hit another record, or it's still expanding. So you have inflation still. You still have an expanding monetary supply, and not a correlation with actual supply of goods. So there's still inflationary pressures there. And then I take my anecdotal, experiences. I go to the store this month, or it would be the last couple of days of July. Price of bread goes up again. The base price, because there's you can always get the cheap loaves. It went up close to 8%. It snapped up like that. I go look at some of these other prices. Eggs, again, another push higher from 15 something. So you're looking at almost $16, almost $17. So another 10% rise in the price of eggs. I went and looked at meat again. Meat went up, maybe not as much as it has in the past, but it shot up again. So I think there's what is happening is you're still having people trying to stay, keep their lifestyle the way they are by expanding credit, by putting things on credit cards. And some reason the market is looking at it as a good thing. They're also looking at some retail data and you looking at it as a good thing. It's not. I suspect that people are actually using actual cash, not outside the credit cards or whatnot, in fewer and fewer goods. And it's just, from the ramifications of rising prices. Where was I going? I was going somewhere else. I lost my train of thought. The point being is that the market can remain irrational longer than you can remain liquid, but they got it completely wrong, in my opinion. This seems completely. We have a generation of traders and whatnot that it's my generation. That we've gone through the housing bust, but we haven't had a real monetary system, and we've just been riding these boom and bust cycles, and we believe that the Fed is always going to be there to protect us. So the markets always go up. Even if they go down, they're going to go up. In fact, if we get bad news, that means the market should go up, just like we're seeing the last. That's how the average person my age and the average hedge fund manager seems to be operating at this point in time. Is that good news is good news, bad news is good news, because the Fed's always going to be there. And in fact, I've mentioned this probably 10 years ago. I was at this point, all trading comes down to what the Fed does, which it shouldn't be that way. What it means is you're just going after simple monetary issues, and you're just trading off a monetary cycle instead of off fundamentals or whatever, and you're just relying on the Fed. Anyway, that's enough of the economic stuff. What else is there? A lot of things. There's some interesting stuff when it comes to jabs. We have one that's actual, old technology that's now being distributed throughout the nation. You have other lawsuits through the mRNA ones that are going through that have they're challenging certain mandates that have been successful. We've got more theories, like I've explained in the past, which I'm sure that those have been throttled, of how these experimental mRNA jabs affect at the cellular level, and possible mechanisms of action when it comes to certain things that are going on in the body, certain unexplained events, certain questions that should have been asked during whatever FDA approval, certain things that should have been asked during trials that weren't asked, that you think simple. It's if you just have a basic biology course, a cellular human biology course that you would understand and be asking, and you'd think that these scientists would do that, but they didn't, because there's a lot of corruption, and now we're finding that also out. And some releases from like Judicial Watch that have gotten documents from the FDA where there's actually, if you remember, there was two guys in the FDA that, or two, there might have been, one of them might have been a gal, I can't remember, but there's two people that resigned over this, how fast and shoddy this was. And now we got emails, and there was a lot of concerns about PR pressure from these companies. They were running PR campaigns and a lot of pressure to fast track this stuff. And don't think that stuff doesn't have ramifications. So basically, we're talking about a corrupt institution, or corruptible people within the institution. And any institution is only as good as the character, the people of character that are in there, or the character of the people that that hold those positions. So we're finding out a lot about this, and it's a developing story still. But you got to parse through all these emails. And of course, you wonder, like, at this point, it's like all these corrupt people, why you put this stuff in emails if you know it's going to come out. But some people, I've come to the conclusion in here, they believe they're doing the right thing for the right reasons. But that's besides the point. I want to keep this short. But with along that lines, that it's good to look into this Dr. Birx. If you remember her, she was one of the lead people up there with Fauci and whatnot under Trump, when all the stuff that she proposed and pushed down our throats. In her book, she pretty much admitted to, or she did admit, that a lot of it was political, a lot of it wasn't science-based, which there was a lot of people calling these guys out on some of the lockdown stuff, some of the masking issues. And I have been one of those persons on the masking issue because of what, I mean, yeah, there are certain masks that are effective, but what we were doing was completely ineffective, counterproductive in a certain sense. And plus some of the lockdown issues when it comes to the business side of things didn't make any sense whatever to me when it comes to like allowing people to gather at Walmarts or whatever, Lowe's, and then locking down other businesses, small businesses, and saying it's for your own good, stay in the house, but hey, we can all hang out at Home Depot or whatever. Didn't make any sense to me. Even from a scientific perspective, when you pulled up all the research studies on these cloth masks and these basic whatever the regular masks you get that you kind of contour to your face a little bit outside the N95, which we all knew at the beginning, which I didn't understand why Fauci and them didn't understand that, which the N95 mask would have been effective, at least on the individual level, where the other mask would not be effective outside of anything that's smaller than a bacterium. But anyway, there's a lot of things going on. I'm going to keep this short, it's 18 minutes, but I'm keeping it under 18. Well, there's a lot of other things going on. Still a lot of things going on in the market. I didn't even get into the Michael Sayer stuff with Bitcoin, or his company is just losing money hand over fist, and yet he's doubling down, which also gives you a lot of insight of why this guy's pushing Bitcoin once he's got into it. And now that his company is significantly hemorrhaging value, that he's still pushing this thing. He's almost doubling down, and I don't know what's going on. I know he stepped down as CEO, or he's going in some other position. There's a lot of things going on in the world. It's almost like you can't keep this at 20 minutes or whatever I've tried to keep this at and go into detail. But that's something you need to look into, because the crypto market is a very interesting place. I believe it kind of the canary in the coal mine of this, but you also have the housing market, the auto market, some of the consumer side of things. You're starting to see the cracks in the wall. Some of the calls from these companies that are coming out, warning on earnings, Walmart warning, a lot of, and these are all signs. I mean, I don't know. But anyway, I'll talk to you later. Peace.